Sportsman's Workshop videos are distributed by Ducks Unlimited. A portion of the purchase price will be used to restore, maintain, and protect wildlife habitat.
If you're gonna go hunting and fishing, you know your Ford just may not do. You need a Chevy to get you out there and to bring you home when you're through. If you're gonna spend time fishing, hunting off deep in the woods, I wouldn't put keys in the ignition unless there's a Chevy underneath that hood. 'Cause my Chevy is built for the highways, built for the backcountry. It'll get you out on the byways, and home is easy as 1, 2, 3. Yeah, if you're gonna tame the wild frontier, your Ford just may not do. You need a Chevy to get you out there and to bring you home when you're through. The heartbeat of America, today's truck is Chevrolet.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Workshop, brought to you by today's truck, Chevrolet. Nobody's winning like the heartbeat of America.
Obviously, we're just about ready for today's goose hunt in the cornfield, and as you can see, we have most of our decoys set, but a prime consideration, very prime, is wind direction. Now, once we have our wind direction determined, point the decoys into it. You know, not all geese are into the wind all the time, and they don't feed into the wind all the time, so mix them up just a little bit. If you'll notice, Terry's behind us placing the last of the decoys, but on behind Terry, you'll see a space. That is a landing zone where we want the geese to land into. Off to the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see another open space between decoys, another landing zone. We want the geese to land in our killing zone. Now, our killing zone is roughly 20 to 35 yards distant from the pit or blind that we're going to be shooting in today. We know that within that distance, if we hit the geese a good shot, we're not going to have any cripples get away from us, and that's prime consideration. Next thing you have to consider is family groups. Now, if you'll kind of scan the decoy field, what you'll notice is a group of geese here, a group of geese there, a group of geese here, all little different families into one feeding area of geese. Set your decoys the same way, remembering decoy patterns, which could be a J pattern, a hook pattern in other words, a V pattern, or an I pattern. But whatever pattern you use, turn it into the wind, but at the same time set family groups. You'll get more geese down to investigate your decoys, and that's what it's all about. Getting the geese down to within a good killing zone to where we know we're not going to miss or we're not going to have any cripples. You know, an important factor that a lot of people don't realize is when geese are alarmed, they have their heads up. So we have sentries, which is the long neck, stand-up type neck you see behind me. We also have the feeder type decoys, as you see with the head down on the ground. Normally they come 2 feeders for every sentry. Well, I think that's a little bit too much. I think basically what you should have is probably 1 sentry for every 8 to 10 feeders. As you can see in the background, and you check your decoy spread, let's make sure that our sentries are on the outside edges of the decoys. And as you scan out towards the outside edge of this decoy field, you'll notice 3 walkers. I call them walkers because they're sentries I have on the outside edge there, walking in to the area where the geese are feeding. Everything looks natural this way with very little alarm. As you can see, we're using Super Magnum decoys out here for our basic set. I firmly believe that we have to have full bodies. But if you'll notice off to the right-hand side of your screen, you will see silhouettes, real large silhouettes off to the right-hand side. Those are our basic attractors, and I think every good set should have large silhouettes. Try that, and I'm sure you'll get more geese in your decoy field. Now, a little more on numbers of decoys. As we begin our goose season, which is early, most of the geese have not seen a decoy set in a number of months. So you can start out with a few decoys, maybe 4, 5, or 6 dozen. But as the season progresses, what transpires is many hunters are in the field, and they become very wary of a few decoys, so increase the amount of decoys you have as the season goes along. Out here today we have roughly 8 dozen in our field. Now this is mid-season, but in another month I will have probably 10 to 12 dozen on the ground, just to help fool the geese into coming down for that one shot that we're always looking for. You know, remembering the basic points now. Wind direction, number 1. Type of pattern you're going to set, and don't forget the family groups, and always increase the number of decoys you're using as the season goes on. Those will be points that will put more geese in your decoy spread. Tell you what, let's do. Let's get back in now and let's do some goose hunting. I got my trusty hunting partner with me today, Terry Nicholson from Anglers All, and we've done a lot of goose hunting together and been rather successful. And between the two of us, we know that the most critical thing after learning how to set decoys is using the goose call itself. There's 3 basic calls, and I think you'd agree, Terry, that number 1 would be the hailing call. When you see geese a long way off, use the hailing call to call them to you. Number 2 is after you get them to you, you got to coax them to come down and take a close look at your decoy field. That's the coaxing call. And number 3, really critical, if they leave your decoy field, call them back to you. That's the hailing, or the comeback call, okay? The comeback call. Now what I'd like to try to do is give you one of each so you can understand and practice this on your own. First, the hailing call. The short kerunk, kerunk, kerunk. That's to hail the geese into you. Now, the coaxing call is kind of a little short start with a gradual taper off. Now, if they leave your decoy field, we obviously want them to come back. The comeback call is very similar to the hailing call. Get them to come on back to you. Now, if you're hunting with a partner, such as I do with Terry all the time, we try to call simultaneously, not exactly together. So I'll ask Terry to get started with his goose call, and I'll mix in my sound with his to sound like a flock of geese are around. That's an idea of what you and a partner can do to really bring the geese down on the ground. So remember, hailing calls, coaxing calls, comeback calls, and then the whole flock right in on you. Remember that, and you'll be more successful. Now that we've got the geese in the decoy field, the next most important thing, obviously, is the shotgun we're using. You know, talking about shotguns, there's basically 3 types. There's a breakover, a pump, and an automatic. It depends on your personal preference. I know I have mine. This happens to be an over and under. And it's simply an over and under because 1 shot's above and 1 shot's below. You simply load it up and close the action, and you're ready to shoot. However, you have to remember, when that action closed, she's ready, the safe must go on immediately when the action is closed. The next type of shotgun that you can use happens to be a pump. And the pump shotgun is just simply what it says. It pumps to close. Now, as with pumps and automatics, hunting migratory birds, you're only allowed 3 shells. Your cylinder up here on the pump and a cylinder in the automatic must be plugged so it'll only hold 2. 1 in the chamber, 2 outside in the cylinder. That's a pump. Simple fact, you drive the pump home, but make sure when the pump is home that it's on safe. The third type that's very popular around the country is an automatic. Again, 3 shells, and it's spring operated, and bang, 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 and you're home free. But one thing about automatics, when you clean them at home and you intend on using them in a goose blind or a goose pit, make sure you put very, very few drops of oil on there and dry it out after you got oil on the gun, because the action on an automatic will collect dirt and dust and it will actually foul on you in the field. And that's not the time for it to foul on you in the field. Not the time. Now, you look at gauges. My goodness, there's 8 gauges, 10 gauges, 20s, 12s, 410s. It really doesn't matter what you want to shoot, but there's what you have to think about is where you're going to shoot. We're hunting over decoys, and I've shot them with 410s out there. I shot it with 20 gauge, but I always like to use a 12 gauge because to me it's very forgiving, a 12 gauge. I like to use a 3-inch 12 gauge. Now 3-inch means the length of the chamber that the shot shell itself will fit into. Okay, 12 gauge 3-inch is what I use. A lot of people use 12 gauges chambered to 2 3/4 inch, but 12 gauge is excellent. Now, a sporting chance would be a 410, which is exciting, and you have to be a good shot. You have to make sure over decoys that the birds are well within range, and 20 yards out maximum is what I like to think. And a 20 gauge now is a little bit better. You got a little greater distance with it, but it's still deadly over decoys, and hey, you don't have all of that recoil that you have with a 12 gauge, if recoil bothers you. Let's talk just a little bit about the sizes of the shot shell we're going to use. You know, you've got 8s and 7s and 6s and 4s and 2s and BBs and God knows what all. We've got a tremendous amount of shot. But Terry, what size shot do you prefer now over decoys in a 12 gauge 3-inch Magnum?
Over decoys, I would most often shoot either 4s or 2s. 4s are you can get a few more in a shell when you're shooting 4s, and you'll get a denser pattern. And over properly decoyed birds, those birds that are inside 40 yards, it is a sufficient shot. What I ideally like to do is shoot a 4 on that first shot and follow it up with a 2 in my over and under.
Why are you going to shoot 4s first and 2s second?
Well, theoretically at least, the first shot's going to be closer. And if the first shot is closer, then I would prefer to have more pellets in the pattern, shoot a little bit denser pattern, and then follow it up with that little bit heavier shot to either take a second bird or to finish off a first bird with. It is my own personal preference to shoot geese over decoys with a 2-barreled gun, either an over and under or side by side. Make the first shot with a little more open choke, like an improved cylinder, with 4s. And the second shot, a little bit tighter choke with size 2 shot.
You know, when you're talking about the various types of chokes in a shotgun, you have improved, modified, and full. Now, one way for you to tell if the different choke in your shotgun is by the use of a dime. In an improved cylinder, a dime will go all the way in and rattle around. The modified cylinder, the dime will fit snugly in the end of the barrel, and in a full choke, it will not go in at all.
Improved cylinder throws a wider pattern.
A wider pattern at, let's say, 40 yards, maximum decoy range. And then a full choke would be a closer pattern.
It shoots a tighter pattern. That's exactly right.
So if I'm shooting an over and under, what 2 chokes should I have in my over and under or side by side?
Well, you could go a couple of ways. You could shoot either improved cylinder and modified. Improved cylinder for the first shot, modified for the second shot. The other way to go is with modified for that first shot and full choke for the second. Full choke for the second.
That's the way I hunt, is with the modified full, and I think it's probably your best way, because remember, your first shot's going to be relatively close at birds, right in your decoys, and normally they'll get up and be going away from you when you have to take that second shot. Now, if you look at, we talked about shot sizes, 4, 6, 8s, 10s, and 12s. I like to shoot a 3-inch, such as you see right here. It's a 3-inch Magnum 2, and I shoot 4s on my first shot and 2s on my second shot, like Terry was saying. And the thing you have to bear in mind now, some places across the country, some places, you're going to be required to shoot steel shot. You have to check your local regulations. And don't be surprised if across the USA you're not going to see more use of the steel shot in years to come. Now, I've heard tell, Terry, that you've said other things. I want you to listen to this. He said other things as to why he really uses an over and under. You never need more than 2 shots.
Third
If
shot's
you can believe that, let's get back to the goose blind.
third shot's always wasted, Dick.
If ground clearance is important in your next pickup, watch this visual test. 2 full-size half-ton 4x4s, Chevy and Ford, try to drive over this protected camera cage. First, the Chevy. Plenty of clearance, but the Ford. Cameras don't lie. When it comes to half-ton ground clearance, nobody's winning like the heartbeat of America.
The heartbeat of America. Today is truck Chevrolet.
Before you leave this subject of the shotgun, you want to make sure that all safety rules just strictly adhered to. Barrels up when you're loaded inside of your blind or your pit. Make sure the safety is on. So safety on and barrels up, and 100% safety with the shotgun itself. Well, Terry, the decoys are set. Nice and warm in here. Enjoying a cup of coffee. What are some of the other things that we need to talk about? Maybe personal camouflage, or goose, how they react to different areas, different weather conditions.
Well, I think certainly camouflage is an important subject. Geese have extremely good eyesight, as you know.
Well, I guess.
And if you're not aware all times that movement can spook the birds, I think you've wasted some of your effort in putting out decoys and camouflaging your blind.
Movement, you mean us moving in the blind or the pit?
Right. That calls not only attention to the pit, but movement to the geese is really sort of unnatural unless it comes from the decoys themselves. Anything that shines, particularly on a sunny day like today, really some real care has to be taken. If, for example, the glasses that I wear, if I am facing into the sun and get a strong reflection off those glasses, it's a dead giveaway to the geese.
That'll spook them, they'll flare off of you?
Absolutely. They just go on a decoy.
Well, let's assume we've had geese in the decoys, maybe we shot 2 or 3, and maybe we're shooting a pump or an automatic, one that ejects the shells somewhere else. Is that a concern of ours, to maybe have shells laying around, empty shell cases?
Certainly. Anything that can shine like the brass on an empty outside your blind has the potential to spook geese. Anything at all outside the blind that is unnatural. In blind camouflage, we try to break up straight lines and corners.
Right, that's a good point.
Those things are unnatural in nature, and geese, particularly after the first week or 2 of the season, become very aware of those things, and it's much tougher to decoy them close, the way you and I like them. It is just essential that you do a good job of camouflage, both of your blind and of your person.
Terry, basically what we talk about here is decoying geese, and a rule around our blind is that the geese have to be less than 10 feet off the ground, backpedaling with their feet down before the pit boss says take them. And I think everybody has to have a pit boss or a blind boss, don't you?
I think that's important. If there's a lot of movement inside the blind, it just multiplies your chances of being geese. You and I have hunted together long enough that you fairly well know what I'm going to do, and I know what you're going to do, and between the 2 of us we can communicate and make sure that we know where the geese are when they're working our spread, and make sure that as they approach, we're going to get our best opportunity. It's important to us to have those geese in close. We don't like long shooting and chancy operations.
Well, I'll tell you the reason I don't like a long shot is because the way I shoot a shotgun, the closer the shot is, the better off I am, and course, one of the big reasons, folks, is decoying gets the birds much closer to you, and there's less chance of a cripple getting away. And we have to protect against that, being hunters. You don't want a cripple going off and dying somewhere. They could die in 5 miles, they could die in 5 days, but try to avoid that. So use decoys. Even if you don't want to decoy them down like Terry and I do, 10 feet off the ground, you can use your decoy field if it's set up properly, and you watch movement, everything's camouflaged well. Use that decoy field to pull the birds down from maybe 80 yards to 30 yards.
That's exactly it. On a bluebird day like today, the geese tend to fly high to begin with, and with the use of a decoy spread, you have potential at least to bring them a little bit closer. I wish we get a little wind or something today.
What is wind going to do?
Well, wind brings our birds down. It makes them fly lower at lower elevations, and they don't tend to fly as far away from the refuge or resting points either. And it makes it potentially easier to decoy your birds.
What are they now? When you say they fly away from, where they're staying overnight in the middle of a frozen lake or in the middle of a field somewhere, very well protected where they can see all approaches, they're flying out to what, cornfields? Or?
Flying to some sort of feed. In this part of the country, it would be mostly corn. Occasionally, it's winter wheat or wheat stubble, but mostly here it's going to be corn stubble.
So we wouldn't worry about looking for them then on a slough or something like this feeding.
I don't think you're going to find them on a slough this time of year unless you have a real good storm. If it's wind-driven snow,
they may set down in where they get a chance to.
They may, and potentially they'll sometimes go to water, like on the river for an hour or so to get some water if everything in the countryside besides the river is frozen.
Well, now, what you're saying then is if we're hunting over our cornfields and our grain fields and winter wheat, we don't need it. Is that what you're saying? To hunt geese.
A dog is always a nice thing to have around, but it is less important to have it over in dry land hunting, say if we were shooting off the lake over floating decoys. On water, a dog is just essential.
It's essential.
Just essential.
Well, it's more essential for duck hunting, though, than it is for goose hunting.
Certainly.
Like
Certainly
out here, right here today, and we've hunted out here several years and a number of years together. We have no use for a dog because once the goose comes down within range and he's 10 feet off the ground and we drop him, it's a simple matter of just walking out in the cornfield and picking him up.
Yeah, we just have no cripple loss here once they're on the ground.
Before you really get out here to hunt with a shotgun, you should visit your local trap range or your skeet range and get your eye and your shotgun in fine tune. Which leads me to this. Actually leading and shooting a goose. When you pull up on a goose, what you need to do is pull up to the goose, right in the center of the goose, come left or right through his beak until you see just a little bit of daylight, and then squeeze off, but continue to follow through with your shotgun and string out your shot. The bird will come up into the shot that way. It'll be more successful. We talked about setting decoys in a cornfield set. Now, something that's probably overlooked a lot across this country is an ice set. First, we need some clean ice, which we've done behind me here to the left. As you can notice, we've swept off an area, and what we're trying to do here is make it look like open water. Now, you can accomplish the same thing by using black plastic. Take a piece of black plastic sheeting, you can buy it at a local hardware store, and cut it out in an irregular pattern and lay it on top of your ice. Now, the next thing is decoy placement. Place your decoys in small groups around the edges, as you can see we've done here. Now, you can either build a blind close by this location, you can put on a set of white coveralls and lay in the snow, or you may even want to lay out on the ice somewhere. Better you than me, because I like it in a nice warm blind. But if you're even conservation minded, what you can do is build some nests like we've built around our pond, and that keeps the geese around, and they'll even hatch more, and it's going to improve your hunting as years go by. Terry, we've talked about, setting the decoys and how to call them. The one thing we haven't talked about, as you know, is what do you hunt out of? Most normally, hay-bale blinds made out of plywood, such as what we're hunting in here, and pits. Which do you prefer?
Well, everything else being equal, I think the first thing we would like to have is a good pit. pits are the best camouflaged or least noticeable of any of the types of things that you're going to hunt out of.
Why?
Well, you can put them out in the middle of a field, the middle in a flat expanse where a goose feels confident to land to begin with. And above surface blinds such as this one, necessarily should be along an edge where there is some natural cover.
Fence row.
Fence rows,
Stuff like that.
tree rows, places like that. There are limitations to where you can put pits, though, as you well know. In this location, we can't put a pit because of the water table.
Yeah, 18 inches down is where our water table is, so as a result, we have to suffer through an above-ground blind.
A blind like this that's in a natural flyway, a place that geese pass over often anyhow, is the next best choice. And then you just simply must do your best to camouflage the blind as well as you can. If you're going to make one or build a blind or pit, make it of adequate size so that you can stay in there all day with comfort.
And I think the key, Terry, is comfort.
Well, I agree. I think you hunt better if you're comfortable. If you know, a smart man once told me that any moron can come out here and freeze to death. But
That's the truth.
If you're a little bit warmer, you pay attention better. You're more inclined to stay in the pit or blind and pay attention to what you're doing.
Well, now, would you build, all right, let's take a blind like you're hunting in here, 5 by 12 by 4.5. Both of them should be the same dimensions, the pit and the blind?
I think that's adequate for both. Obviously, the blind you would like to make as small and as little less obtrusive as you can, but hopefully you would still be able to make it large enough to have some comfort in there.
So you still got to camouflage the blind. That's why you're saying keep it small.
Absolutely.
But the pit really doesn't matter. You can dig a pit whatever size you want to dig.
You can
As
dig
long
a
as you
pit.
got an adequate cover.
Right, and as long as you have a backhoe so you don't have to dig by hand.
More than that's true. And if you're digging a pit, you've got to hold your dirt away too.
Absolutely. You have to haul the dirt away so that when you're finished and that pit is installed and the cover is camouflaged, that pit looks just like the rest of the field. That's the whole key. Geese will come to that in a minute, far more easily than they will come to an edge blind or a surface blind like we're hunting out of today.
Well, then in a pit or a blind, if it's snow, we'd have to have some type of a white cover over it. And if it's just normal, cut grass or corn stubble, we'd have to have the typical, like your jacket you have on, a brown, dark brown, light brown camouflage color.
Right. You try and match up the camouflage or cover for your pit or blind with the existing terrain and vegetation, whatever it may be. If it's corn stubble, you would like it to look like corn stubble, and if you're out hunting in winter wheat, you would like your blind to look either green or brown, depending upon which part of the wheat field that you're shooting in.
I think you're kind of like me. We like to get into an enclosed blind or pit, turn the heater on, and be comfortable.
That's it. In a nutshell, that is it.
Come in here real slow. Real slow. Take them, Terry. Take them. Hey, good shot, Terry. Good shot. Well, if your decoys are ready, you're camouflaged properly, this is the result. Canadian geese in the oven.
Proof positive.
ducks, geese, swans. Waterfowl like these are the barometers of our health. They need plenty of clean air and water just like we do. So when they start to disappear, we know the health of our own air and water is in danger. And so are we. Ducks Unlimited works to bring them back by restoring their habitat. Join Ducks Unlimited now, because protecting waterfowl protects us all.